Many people have problems with art and not with reality.
So why is art different?
It's pretty simple, right?
This is knowledge, this is thinking, this is thought.
Yeah, it does something strange with your head.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair. My name is still Londo. Well, hi friends. It's been a long time. I do apologize for the break in the programming schedule here. I do, of course, have a million excuses I could throw at you, but excuses are for teenagers, so I will just say this. We are working on some serious platform changes here, and we're almost ready to share them with you. In reality, hopefully already next week. So do stay tuned and all of that good stuff. It's coming your way. I do have even better news, though. And that is today, finally, on my part, we have Signe Vad on the show. This has been a long time coming. Her and I are kind of colleagues of sorts now, and I'm starting to get to know her, and it was about high time we had her on the program. And the truth is, she's actually kind of an inspiration to me. She's one of the hardest working artists I've ever met. She has about 1,500 projects on top of her own production at any given moment. She's a serial collaborator. She reaches out to people and she doesn't ask for permission to do anything. She just makes it work through her own hard work and scrappiness. So I think that's kind of something we all need. There's a lot of waiting around for permission for artists, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So Signe is kind of an inspiration with her forward drive with her artistic practice. But our talk is also fascinating because we hear about her doubts and thoughts and dreams about her total practice. And, if that isn't what this show is for, I don't know what it is. So I'll get out of the way here. Please enjoy Signe Vad and stay tuned.
Which is about thinking. And actually, she's German, and they have the word Geist. And Geist is something of the same as ånd in Danish. It's not... It can be, but it's not necessarily connected to spirituality or some overworldly thing,
Right. But I think you actually gave me the perfect segue when you talked about having this fluid life, all these different parts that you move around and how it's not necessarily so compartmentalized. Because one of the things that fascinates me about you and your practice and what you do is the amount of things you do and the amount of extra personal artistic you do. Can I say that?
Extra personal artistic. That's I'm not really sure what you mean by that.
When I say extra, I mean outside of your personal
like
artistic practice.
Extraterrestrial.
Exactly. Foreign to. So like you've had numerous art spaces for exhibiting other people's art as well as your own. Mm-hmm. You are super active in working with a younger generation of artists and curators. Mm-hmm. You had a TV show for a while, which you may still have.
Live stream, yes. Now it only comes in packs of connected to a specific project.
So you have, instead of just saying, I'm going to make my own art all the time, you have the external world that you've built up as well.
Yeah, but also to this list is that I'm an artist myself. I have a master's, which I did very late in life, but until then
There's still hope for me, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but until then I was just self-taught,
Right.
Working deeper and deeper into photography and visual art. But so I have a master's in fine art photography, and I work with photography and video art and performance art now a little, and I use elements, I make installations. So I also have that private practice, you can say that.
But that's what I mean, you have a lot of energy in that. Yeah. On top of all the other stuff, or even in case of,
Yeah, I did a few, I think I do. Recently, it's been one solo show, at least a year, and then group connections and group shows and so on. On
top of working,
I've been so lucky to be invited to that, which I always think that now it's going to stop. That was the peak. But so far it's because a solo show is special because you can work the whole, you can make people enter your whole entity
Right.
of thinking or working or a sense spirit thing to try to translate the Danish words, which is totally wrong in English. But yeah. So I do that, and then I do all the other stuff, and then I work my job to pay the rent at home because there's no money in any of the other things. I'm really bad with that.
Yeah. But I mean, this is, well, yes and no. You are and you aren't, because you've also run, you have been able to make a 2-year plan for an exhibition space beforehand, apply for money, and get that financially off the ground. And that's a huge amount of work. So yes and no, maybe, you're bad at making the extra money, but
I'm bad at making money for myself.
Exactly.
I always put it into the projects because, it always means it can go a little further, or there's also a thing when I work very much in a no budget zone, meaning that the last year we had this exhibition space as a group, but I was kind of the center character, meaning that I was the one always knowing when we need to apply for money and when we need funding, need to find money, need to have a new exhibition. The one keeping track of the whole, flow in the space, and that, and
project management, really.
Yeah, exactly. And we just had to get the rent, and as soon as the rent was secured, then it's kind of no budget. But as soon as you start, that's always my problem in these projects, is as soon as you start giving salary to somebody or fees, you actually ought to do it to everybody. And that's a lot of money you have to make, where it's very much easier. I'm like a fish in water when it's no budget, everything, and we all do it because we're happy, stupid artists that believes in what we're doing.
No one's getting anything, so hang around if you want to. But...
And if we have a little, then a few people can get a little. I'm trying to change that because I know how hard it is for myself financially. Actually, this is very. Why do we talk about money? It's very, very boring topic.
Well, because it ties back. I'll tell you how it ties back. It ties back in the sense that you continually work in this way. Let's not talk necessarily about money, but in terms of having to do everything yourself, having to do, you get no outside assistance or permission. Do you ever dream of just selling artwork, laying around, being in your studio, making work, selling artwork, getting income from that, bing, bang, boom?
I think that I dream about it all the time. This fordybelse. How do you say that in English?
I'm so bad at changing the words. The ability to go in, to really delve into something.
Yeah. I dream about that. Yeah. I had a long time where I had time to read philosophy and theory books and so on. And when you do that, it's really complicated. It takes time. And I was walking. I'd been ill, so I was walking a lot, and I could think about everything that I had. Reading when I was waiting at the hospital. It was like half an hour. It's perfect. Then you can read for half an hour. Right. That's it when it's philosophy. And then you can walk around and then you can think about it. And I really dream about that time. Yeah,
because you're constantly pulled out of that practice.
Yeah. But the thing is that if I was just in my studio doing work and selling and, making a living of that, I think, first of all, it can be pretty stressful to produce enough.
Absolutely.
That's a different... But I think also if everything was well, if, somebody gave me $1 million and said, okay, rest your soul, go and do whatever you want to... I think I would start doing something that matters again.
What do you mean by that?
Something that, my works... matters because they're kind of they're always connected to some thinking about being in life and how we as humans are in life. But most people would consider them very unpolitical. I consider them that the underlying background is very political, but it is, I work with the aesthetics as a language or as an impact. Very often. I also connect it to some kind of intellectual thinking or something, but in some of the things I do, that's how I work. Whereas when I do the live stream TV, it's a different thing. Then it can be more political. It's a direct tool to work politically.
Right, it's more overt in that sense.
But when I do all these exhibition spaces and so on, it's always from an urge to change the world, you know. And if I was just sitting in my studio doing my stuff, my pictures and my videos, and I would, you know, maybe they would become more political. I don't know, more direct political, because it is there, but it's just very subtle. I sometimes I think about it's like you know, making I don't know. Sometimes I think that we believe that things have to be very directly to have an impact on the world, and I think that everybody is doing very direct. No, not everybody, but you know, the subtle impact, the indirect impact,
the unquantifiable impact.
Yeah, and not so obvious.
Yeah.
Understanding is actually extremely important in our time. I think also the visual aesthetics becomes extremely important because we are raped with pictures all the time. And the thing to quietly look at a picture, you know, go into it. I think it's, you know, I think it's important. I think somehow it's important for our
Yeah.
But it's intellectual. It's intellectual. It's important because it's expanding us.
I'm happy to hear that, because I get very cynical sometimes about art having any power at all to change the world or do anything, really. It can affect us, you know, like I mentioned earlier, you work with a lot of young artists, and that must clearly have an effect on them to have this collaboration and have someone who has a lot of experience, you know, just input, etc. But I do get really cynical about the ability, you know, if someone says, I want to change the world with my art, my thought is usually like, go change the world, don't make art, you know?
You know, but that's also true. My answer would be like that too. I don't want to change the world with my art. I'm like a philosopher, you know. Do you change the world when you write a philosophy book?
Question mark.
It's not that I'm a philosopher, because and a philosopher is something totally different. But my way of working with my thoughts, of being in the world, and my artworks is actually in that line. So instead of being in an activistic line, or, you know, because a lot of people work like that, and you know, we're just in different spots, you can say. But actually I would say something about the DIY?
DIY,
DIY platform that I move on a lot is generated from the same. I think it's boring when you work in a visual language or artistic language or activistic language that's already created. You know, it's always about creating your own platform. It's always about creating, not because things have to be new, but because thinking can be unique. Groups can create something unique, or you can, you know, and we have to, if I should put more into the world, why should I put something into the world that is already there almost, you know? So I always, you know, my generator is always moving for making a new kind of, putting things together in a different way so it makes a new kind of space. Otherwise, it's not interesting. But it's not always it becomes a new space. It's not always it works. I have an intention, and I work with also the exhibition spaces. I always work like I do with my artwork. I am not the one who can sit down and write a whole project description, and then I start working afterwards. You know, I remember once heard that, I don't know, it's a story, but it's just true. I heard Hitchcock saying that, you know, he made all these total finished what do you call it?
Oh, like the treatments or the scripts or the
scripts. What do you call them? Books when you
what
make
are they called? My English is falling apart. They are called. I used to do these. They're little drawings. You make little squares and you draw out the scenes and block it.
He finished everything: camera angles, light, everything. Right. when he had made this script.
Before he even started the movie.
So for him, when he started filming, it was boring. Because he already done the film in his head.
Just acting it out.
Yeah, and I'm totally opposite. I don't know what I'm doing. I have an idea, I follow some kind of hunch, and I have no idea where it leads to, and I have to walk along. And it's the same when I do an exhibition space. So it's not always that it ends up creating something new, but the intention is that I need to go on a path that I cannot see somebody else has been walking on, because that's boring, and that's not expanding the world. So in that way, there is the same kind of intention behind.
So basically, when you're following your nose, you're looking at something and saying, "This doesn't look very interesting unless we do it this way."
I'm following my inner nose.
Exactly.
I'm not following the outer. I'm following some thoughts that I don't even know what means.
Right. But you are gravitating towards this unknown. Because, we talked about this just a second ago. I have very much, I'm the control freak guy, and I need the systems to be set up. And so therefore, I'm constantly seeking permission to be able to work, instead of being like, yeah, fuck all that. I'm going to do it myself. And we live, luckily, in a country which, in a lot of ways, has a system in which you can build up some sort of financial... It's miserable. No one's making a lot of money, but you can pay the rent, or whatever it might be. But I don't tend to gravitate towards that, because I think the insecurity of it makes it even more hard to make the work or to do anything.
For me, it has nothing to do with where I live. It's also always about seeing what kind of possibilities there is. I think actually Denmark and Copenhagen is much more limited in that, because everything is so structured and controlled. And,
but you made it work.
So yeah, I did, and I can tell you that the first exhibition space I had, I had a studio and a dark room, and I closed down the dark room, and then I made a gallery, because there was a need for. It was in mid-zeros, 2005. I thought there was a need for the whole wave of contemporary photography art, fine art.
Was that Signe Vad gallery? What was it called?
Yeah. Because Photographic Center was not showing so much. With a little Finnish, a little, the Finns were hot on the air, but not so much. And people in Copenhagen, in my colleagues from they were complaining, they were bitching about it. I was at a dinner with a lot of people from working with photographic art, and they were bitching about that there was so, there were so few platforms for it. So I thought, okay, I'm opening a gallery.
Right.
And then
Shut up, let's do this.
And then I opened a gallery. I never applied for any money. I never got anything paid. Yeah, one time I made an exhibition with the Icelandic Art Academy, and we applied some Danish Icelandic fund and got 5,000. That was the only thing I ever got. After a short while, it turned out that every time I invited somebody, they wanted to do something else in photography. So I opened the space up to, the reason changed,
right? The
motivation, the need changed.
Well, your desire too.
Yeah, but more also, it's usually also based on what is needed here. What is lacking? And at that time, it was in 2005, there was this huge boost of commercial galleries in Copenhagen. Everything. There was so much money in art, but there was no underground. Yeah. Underground was a word that, was connected to Levi's or Smirnoff. You could not use that word.
Yeah.
And I didn't care about that. And I invited the noise scene we made festivals and, stuff like this. So I found out that, it's about, I hate that. I worked from, and I hate intuition, stomach and shit like that, but a feeling of, this is needed. Right. And what happened was we created some kind of environment. And when you meet people who was playing was part of these festivals back then, they still talk about it. Oh, I got it. I met somebody who said, I played down here where it all began. Because at that time, there wasn't all these people playing around on the institutions or galleries or anything like that. There was no noise. They had their own little hidden scene.
There was no structure, really.
No, they had their own hidden scene. Nobody knew it existed. If you weren't part of it, nobody knew it. So in that way, I had no money from nowhere. I just did it, and I learned along, and I continued walking that path.
But what is it about that? Because you dream about having the chance to go more in depth with your work, and you realize also that it could also be a bad thing that you get something out of the external you, having these spaces, working with other artists, that maybe being alone wouldn't necessarily be the dream that we like to make it to be.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, doing this podcast, sometimes I'm like, for the love of God, what are you doing? You need to be working on the other thing, you know?
Yeah.
But for some reason, I keep being drawn back to it because I get a lot out of talking to people and about this. There is something about the more open, not just a studio practice, but being part of something.
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot more opportunities than we give credit for also by doing this.
Yeah.
But what is it? Because I've seen you, you know, we know each other. So I've seen you also have those moments where your head is in your hands and you're like, what am I doing? Yeah. This is way too much work. What the fuck, you know? Yeah. But you go back, you keep going back.
Yeah. The thing is that I'm 51 now, and I've had cancer, and you know, sometimes my health is not working so well. So and when I work so much, sometimes I just get sick. Yeah. And I get sick and I get sick and I get sick and I get sick, and you know, and sometimes it's also like stress because I just have too much on my plate. So I really don't know. I mean, now the thing is that we have closed the contract with the space now. We have a stable in the meatpacking district as an exhibition space, which is very raw and weird. Rough like shit, like hell.
Like a stable?
A genuine, really old original stable. Yeah. And we have cancelled the contract now, so I don't have to carry the load of financing, getting money for financing the space all the time.
How long is it going to be? When is it over?
In July, it's the last month.
Oh, that's right. That's soon.
Yeah, but the thing is, we have access to the space from our collaborators, Warehouse 9.
So you can always leave the door just a little bit open.
No, we already have some plans. You know, we have an exhibition coming up in October with Class Stark, and then we apply for money, and then we of course pay for that. You know, we have to negotiate some kind. Yeah, so we will still exist, but we will be much more free. I will, you know. So what I do is I put too much on my plate, and then I suddenly realized that it's too many things, because every little thing, then new opportunities come, and then I also take that in, and then I also take that in.
And there's too much going on.
Suddenly it's too crazy, and then I have to downsize it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing now. But it's also to be playful and free.
To not make it too rigid, too systemized, too much the same.
Because it's killing me. Then it's not fun anymore. And then it's just like another job. And that's then also the feeling of the place disappears. It's about making a platform for meeting. You know, about making a platform for meeting to kind of open up for other ways to be in the world. It can be, we're very much, some of the group, the syndicate is very interested in, Cree is a syndicate, but I am just the main character, like the one pulling all the strings. But then there's some that's working very much with nature and connectedness and feminism, like hydrofeminism and so on. And there is some working very much with some philosophers and some artists. But everybody is concerned about that we need to rethink how we are in the world, and we need to connect to the world again, and we need to and we are criticizing some thoughts of the Enlightenment, of the modernism, which was a very good thing, but there was also a lot of you can call it side effects that is overwhelming, and we need to rethink a lot of the structures. So we have a manifest, and we have some basic things that we all are kind of concerned with,
concern ourselves,
and that's the essence. So that platform doesn't have to be a physical platform, because now it has been there, now it's manifested.
Right. And that ties back into individual practice that you guys all might have, whatever it is that you do.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing to pivot too, because you also just had your own solo show, which is the whole other thing, which is that you have a studio, you have an artistic practice, you produce things, you hang them on the wall.
Yeah.
And, I was closest. This is the show of yours that I've been closest to in terms of actually seeing, also in production, but also just seeing it become itself.
Yeah.
And it seemed like you felt very good about this show. Like it was a good experience for you to make a solo show, put your name on an invite, and
the thing is that I must say that part of my practice, and this back to the sitting in the studio working with, I always question: do we need to produce all these things? Artists are producers, and we produce things into the world as well as so many other companies, and so that's always a question.
More stuff.
Yeah, more stuff. Yeah. So I always question myself. I always question why, and sometimes it. But I work with photography, and I keep going back to that media. But this show was a mix of video and photography, and this video was actually a video piece I made from a performance that I created last year, and the reason why I was so happy with the show, both because of some of the works that I thought ended where I wanted it to end, like become what I wanted it to become, but also because this was the end of Homo Canosa project, and Homo Canosa project I've been working on since 2014-15. I started with the first. And for me, it's it's been a lot of thinking around that, and a lot of works, and it's a very loose project in a way. It has a lot of udstikker,
a lot of side grooves.
Yeah, or it's made out of different parts that is kind of in the same hat.
Yeah.
And this one, because of the video, which is a sci-fi lecture, some archaeologists have dug out some bodies from our time and talk about what they find. And Homo Canosa, I can say, is I usually call it human of flesh. So it's a whole project about our relation to our base material, our own nature, our flesh, but also our base nutrition for many people, not necessarily all, and about some kind of alienation connected to this nature of ourselves and the animals. So we see animals as products instead of live creatures, and we see our own flesh as either a study for research or science or something we kind of try to manipulate to look nice, or
right.
a holster.
Ignore as much as possible.
A holster that we ignore the inner.
Yeah.
So it's very much about connecting, exploding or splitting up the dualistic setup, the split between the material world and the spiritual world, and connecting them.
Right, that we're just riding the body is essentially a machine which carries the brain. That idea.
Yeah, and for me, it's we need to connect with ourselves. There's a huge what I see is that I see that in the Western world, or in the we can't say industrialized world anymore, because but in the contemporary neo-capitalistic world, we have the alienation that began in the modernization and industrialization has taken some kind of warp speed, it's called, and it's beyond the beyond of alienation, and we don't even get it yet. And that's what I'm addressing, and I do it visually, so people are confronted with flesh in different way, aesthetic or grotesque or erotic or beautiful, landscaping, cosmic, whatever, But it's kind of massaging our our own relation to our own basic flex. That's how I think about the visual pieces. But the video is explaining in a different way, from a totally different angle, and connecting to the viewer from a totally different angle, but it's in the same project. So I felt very happy because I felt that now I've done it. Now, I had the feeling all the time that I'd done like 4 solo shows in different parts of this, and it wasn't really there yet, and da 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 da.
And now you kind of did it.
Yeah. Now
what a feeling,
I close the circle with this, both that the pictures, the visual pictures, was this time human tissue and not animal tissue,
which you'd been researching or trying to get a hold of for a long time.
The placenta. I tried to find out how to photograph human tissue because I thought it should not only be animal intestines, and I wanted intestines or something. It's not microscope photographs. It's close-ups, but it's not microscope.
Right. It's hard to get human intestines.
It is, and it's also something about if things become too complicated. First of all, I don't have a lot of time sitting in my studio, riding around to the world, applying for money to go to Mexico to meet a mortician there.
Right.
I don't have half a year. I don't have half a year to do all the work it takes. Then I can't pay my rent at home. Period. So that's just not an option. So I was thinking in all directions. I've been writing out to some pro-life people, and not pro-life. What's it called? The people who are so interested in death. There's a lot of
like the whole accepting death movement. Yeah,
exactly. And there's a lot of people who are working very much with this right now. And I've been trying to find a way to do. I wrote to the forensics in Denmark and the different hospitals and so on. But there's so many rules.
We can't give you this.
No, and I can't come there, and there's so many.
There's a lot of ethical concerns also.
Yeah, and I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. And then this midwife said, "How about a placenta?" And he was like, "Perfect, because it's not death, it's life."
Right.
So that's how the last pictures was human tissue, and it was human tissues bringing life, and it wasn't a cadaver. It was
right. It was alive in that sense.
Yeah. So.
Well, I thought it worked out great, just as having been on the sidelines and watching this come to be. But I'm curious also, when you say it's done now, how much effort are you going to put into putting it out there? Or is it done?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like you had a show and you put a ton of work into this. Should it have a longer life in terms of a public facing?
I would love to do a book. Yeah, but also because it's also, I think, a line of thinking. It's more than just a visual project. It's a whole thinking project for me. So, and I would love to do a book.
That format would be great for it in reality, because you could do all sorts of stuff with it.
Yeah, and I have an idea on how to go about it, but it's very important for me that if I do a book, then you enter the project. You don't just take a book up and look at it, and the pictures don't work as a normal, really nice, intaking photo book.
It's not a coffee table book.
No, but also I have a shelf full of art books, and it's books about maybe a photographer done a book about a huge project, or
right, retrospective style,
or just this exhibition, and there is like this Finnish photographer who did this whole exhibition with portrait. I have books like that, or Jeff Wall, big books with a lot of his different series and so on. It would never work like that. You'd have to enter the homogeneous project in a way. So the book has to have some kind of, again, sensuality, which is
sensuousness.
Sensuousness in a way. Yeah, maybe you can create a word. Yeah. So you can enter. And then there has to be some text also. So that's my thinking. But I have been too busy to dive into it.
And are you torn between wanting to start a new project also? Feel that feeling of being done and like, okay,
no. I'm already working with a lot of other stuff
Yeah.
at the same time, you know. So yeah.
I mean, because that's just super interesting. This idea of the life of a project, right? And the other thing is, a good example is your website. If you go to your website, which I think people should do, there is a ton of stuff on there.
Yeah.
You are extremely prolific. And it can be hard to then figure out, where do we start? Like, what life does this stuff have? And it also ties back to this idea of like, why do we produce more stuff, less stuff? What are we doing here? But for me, the forward-facing part of all of this, the engagement with the public, is a big question. Because for me, the high comes from making it in a lot of ways. And then the high comes maybe one day from showing it, the first 4 hours of showing it. And then after that, it's just kind of like, okay, now what? You know, and so there's that whole relationship to the public, which you've built up through exhibition space and stuff. But what about in terms of just your work?
The thing is that I think that approaching others with your own work is really hard. And I don't like that. Is it because it's humiliating, or? No, it's fragile. And I have problems with doing that and keeping my self-respect. No. I have problems with doing that in a dignified way where I don't become some kind of underdog or something. I really have problems with that position. Because I change, and I don't like to change. I don't like to be somebody's underdog, and it's nothing what other people do. It's what I do myself.
Right.
So I'm so insecure when it's about my own stuff. So I rather just, then I just leave it, and then I go somewhere else
And see if something happens.
I mean,
But maybe that's also a good reason to be part of these big collaborative projects, because then you have permission to do whatever you want with your own stuff in those contexts too. You show work sometimes as part of these artist-run spaces that and then you don't have to come with your hat in your hand and say, "Please, may I? Is this good enough to be?" It's that whole permission complex, the military-industrial permission complex.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just I've been reaching out a few times, but the thing is that now the Homo Canosa project is pretty special because it's very abstract photographs, and it's very the visuality is somehow like old classic painting. Something it's very in some of them at least there is different visual languages. Visual outcomes, but we're in a field where you are diving into flesh, and a lot of people don't like that aesthetics. I'm sure of that because and they don't like the project. So it's also very special.
Right, and doesn't necessarily reflect on anything.
And it's very difficult, and not very different. It's very different from what my other photographic projects are, because it's usually stage photography. Usually I use myself as an actor to make some kind of metaphors, commenting on things, or working with absurdity, or, dealing with how to be in life in different ways, So it's very different. And I have understood now that a lot of people don't like that project so much, and I don't care, because I do it because I had to do it, and I continue to do it because it's not finished, and and there is no emptiness like that, because it's like I said, it's like writing a book, Now the last chapter is there, It's not, but the last chapter would be actually a publication, and something that takes the whole thinking of a project and put it together. When I say thinking, I talk aesthetically. It's a weird mix of thoughts, philosophy, poetry, and visual aesthetics.
But that's where you have, like, in a way, it seems to me like this project runs up against the limits of photography, because it is very ornate and visually beautiful and stuff, but you're talking about something beyond the photograph hanging on the wall.
I'm not interested in which, I come from photography and I love the media. I really love to work with it, but I don't care. I'm reckless in that. In that way, I'm totally reckless as well. You know, it doesn't. I don't think of in terms of is it a photograph or is it a digitally or is it I'm doing a picture. Right. You know. And you can say the source is flesh. Yes, that's maybe important, but you know the picture is important. You know, so
in and of itself as an object.
Yeah, it could have been a painting. You know.
But the interesting thing is, for example, you say the picture is important, but when you talk about a book, you have to go farther into it than a picture in a book.
Yeah, but the picture is each piece, and what you see is representing the thought in the book. Right. You know, so.
Which goes back to that weird idea also you were talking about, the whole thing about like, should I produce? What is all this for?
Yes,
you know?
Yes, yeah.
And that's easy to spin out on, you know, to get into this weird circle.
Yeah, it's really hard. I think about it both as when we make shows in Kre and when I do my own shows. And I think a lot about. I saw that they just had an opening for a professor at the Art Academy for recycling artwork made out of recycling. Really great. That I think that we in the art world are starting to think that way, right. Because we have been huge contributors to the production level, and we transport in big boxes things all around the world.
It's environmentally really bad.
Yeah, it is.
I think a lot about frames. I worked in framing, and some of the cheap, affordable frames are rainforest wood.
I fell totally in love with the latex. Mm-hmm. You know, latex seems like skin. I thought it was synthetic, but then I find out latex is from rubber trees. Yeah. I'm not finished with it yet. That's another project. I have some things sometimes and I don't really understand when I work with it, why I do it. It's usually coming, but I'm just kind of clinging to it for a while and doing it once it was like, it was flies. I was working with flies in all kind of ways. And, so I kind of sometimes grab hold of something and then I explore it both in photographs and in objects and make things out of it.
What is this for, in a way?
I don't know, yeah, and it all becomes very metaphoric, and then maybe 2 years later I realized what I was actually working with, what kind of an idea that was behind.
Isn't that frustrating, or no?
It's frustrating because everything is based on applying for money. It's based on that you can put words on your things.
It's not frustrating because it takes a long time, or that later you see what it was for.
No, it's fun.
I really like your attitude. Yeah. I get frustrated because I will take 2 years to figure something out and just be like, it was right there. I should have figured it out. I had 2 years of good work time,
But I mean, sometimes it's crazy how blind you can be. I once did a picture of a nude girl who had very, very small, like almost boyish body, but she was a woman actually. And she was standing, in a silhouette almost in front of a window. And then there was a little pool of blood between her legs, between her feet from dripping, And that was shortly after I had aborted, lost the fetus, And I didn't make a connection. Like totally, I mean, how crazy, how crazy.
Straightforward is that?
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't make it more straightforward than that.
But that's fascinating because that's the life of the unconscious, right? This like bubbling.
I just had to make that picture.
Yeah, without ever really thinking about why.
My God, yeah. You know what? We're sitting here talking. I like your format, but I also think it's very very loose. We talk in very different ways. Maybe you could need. I don't know.
It's hard to tie it together.
Yeah, I think it would be very hard to.
It is, and that's one of the problems, or one of the challenges of doing it this way. And I don't know how to tie art together. I think that's probably the biggest problem, is I still don't know what to do with all of this. But I keep coming back to it. So you're welcome if you have any suggestions to like where to go with something like this. Because for me, it's always just like a timestamp. I here and a now in a conversation.
Yeah.
And part of it is just the way I talk.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is I don't actually know what art is for. And I don't know why it is that we make art.
Yeah. And you know, I can be very, like when you teach, you can be very concrete and having very, it's hard for me, but I can be very like talking very simple about about the process or about topics. But my head is very floating off, and so
when we have this many other things,
when we have this loose talk, it's kind of like, you know, all the time it just floats into this and that and that. Oh, I want to comment this you said 10 minutes ago. Yeah?
How do we land this plan?
Yeah, I'm just curious if you can use it for anything, because I think it's.
Well, I don't ever pretend it's anything else than what it is, because for me it's fascinating to give artists the chance to talk loosely about what they do.
Yeah.
But it does mean it is unstructured.
Yeah, yeah.
And cool. It comes back, in a sense, to me, to the question of why we do it.
Yeah.
You know, you started later with making art, if I understand correctly. And do you ever question even why you do what you do?
I question it all the time, because I think that when I do art, and I make something because I think that I have something special that, you know, is so interesting that others could maybe get something out of seeing it. So if I take that position, I really have to do my best, because why should I be able to make something special? This world is full of unique beings, you know, unique human beings, and to take that position, to think that I have something special to contribute with, you know, I question it all the time.
Yeah, you just went two directions there, you know, that A, you have something to come with, and B, do I? You know,
but I have to be sure that I think it's that I can argue for that this is so important that I will do an effort for others to show it to others.
But what about to you? How important is it to you?
Yeah, but I can do it in my free time, and I can put it in my drawer if it's, you know. But if as soon as I you know, I can't help it. I do. If I don't do these works, and it can be text or visuals, or at different times. Sometimes it's only text I work with, poetry or whatever. You know, if I don't, I get depressed. I think I get down. You know, when I was alone, I could go thinking, but now when I have family and other people, I get depressed because I feel like a hamster in a wheel, and it wears my soul down. You know, it really does. So I have to have these comments and reflections of the world, and that are so. But I could just do it in my spare time if I think that. Because the thing is that we live in a world where everybody think it's cool to just get attention, and I think it's very arrogant in a space that what I do something that, you know, others should just look at.
Check this out,
I'm so
guys.
interesting for others, you know. So I think that it demands a huge amount of humility for myself to question all the time, is this interesting for others? Should I just, because there is two different of pollution. There is the concrete one, which is really bad. Is this production or producing these things, exhibitions, art pieces and so on, is it so important that I could take resources from the world to make them exist? And to make the finish, because that's the most resourceful in my line of work. But that's one thing, and the other thing is, you know, there's also another pollution, which is everybody wants to be seen. We all human beings are making a lot of noise and not thinking, is it so important? Is it important for others? Does it mean something, or am I just putting a lot of noise into the world that is just taking the attention away from what is important? And I think the world is on. I'm pretty dystopic, but I also think it has a reason. I'm not only dystopic. I also think it has a reason, and I think we can change things, because I do believe all the scientists that say that it's really, really bad right now with the nature, with the environment, with pollution. And the oceans, and when the most of what do you call it? The coral reef in the Great Barrier Reef, when 80% dies in a few years, it's serious.
Yeah.
So I do believe that we are in a critical point in the world, and it's not just, And every time I speak up in the Commonwealth with other people, whatever I do takes attention, and every time I do something that takes attention, which is just entertainment or look at me or interesting or funny, ha ha ha, I take attention away from our minds on the topics that's important. That's the thing. I was listening to the radio at work yesterday, and I was like so depressed, because it's like they want to create an idiocracy. It's like a deep stupidity. And it's one of the most popular Danish radio programs, and they just talk bullshit. And there's so many things, and I don't believe in being serious all the time. I love the idea of that the psychedelic thinking is coming back. We need that. We don't need to be serious, but we need to believe that what we do is something of importance. Sometimes it means something, and it does make a difference whatever you put into the common world.
Well, the difference maybe is just even asking the question.
But yeah, because that means you have a conscience about it,
Yeah, and you might think twice about.
When you make a radio program where everybody's talking bullshit and just it's just entertainment, the whole thing, everybody ringing in and calling in, and being participating, it's all kind of superficial bullshit. And I just think, okay, that's cool, entertainment is good sometimes, checking out, having, relaxing, but the world is so full of it that it's difficult for the important things to be heard or felt, or
Well,
that's my conscience about making art always, and making exhibition platforms also, and creating events. That's why I also always have to go into to create a new field that is not there. I'm not saying that I can invent a whole new line but just for myself or the platform or the people where we try to do something in a different way. That is, the world's obsessed with words, begreber.
Concepts.
The world's obsessed with concepts and models. And every time somebody makes something, they have to evaluate so they can make kind of model and then recreate it. I don't believe in that. You cannot. You can learn from your experiences, yes, but it's much more fun when we think new all the time than we, find, I'm working in this way with this, so boring.
Well, the thought that popped into my head was that in a time of crisis, which may have, all of humanity may have been a crisis on one level or another, but in our current time of crisis, we have to do something. There's that choice. Either you're going to lay down and we die, or we have to do something. That's what occurs to me.
I mean, I'm really much into henna art. I have two two thinkers I've been working along with. It's Hannah Arendt and Nietzsche, and I really see a lot of a lot of people just live, keep up a life, but there is also that's really beautiful because that's how life continues. But there is also, in some ways, I see the banality of evil is like a pest. It's like it's spreading, and I think it's the only way to deal with being in a world where you can see that this is just not right. And it's so, I don't believe that me as a consumer should be the one that made politics about how the neo-capitalistic system, because as long as we have commercials and advertisement and they work so hard on manipulating, then I as a consumer cannot trust myself, because I am hardcore manipulated all the time with the best tools they can come up with, you know. And
that's some cutting edge stuff they got going on there.
And me as an individual, you know, I cannot resist that. I can do that sometimes. I can try, but I cannot. And that means that it cannot be me, the consumer, that should make the politics of what should be in the world and what not should be in the world. Because at least not as long as somebody's trying to manipulate me all the time. So I do believe that it's political. And I do believe that since we have a global world, we have to have some global political structures about pollution, about, you know, who owns the earth, who owns the resources. If you own a piece of world, how did I get here? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. Well,
it is tying it all together. You know, as much as you may have just burnt out on that line of thought, it is tying it together.
Yeah, but I believe that that the banality of evil that Hannah Arendt defined with her Eichmann in Jerusalem, that way of being in the world is very present right now. And that's why I also believe that political is not necessarily to take action. And because also very often I see activists that just replay. And replay is not interesting. It is because it's the right way to be, and it's, you know, it's not interesting. As soon as something is the right way to be, the right way to think, the right, you know, when you're in this group, that's how you think, then you're already degenerated. You're
lost.
Then you're already, the thought is already stiffened and degenerated, and the activity is already lost its boost on the world because somebody already did it, or, you know. And I think also, I remember myself as young, I thought that I had invented a new way of thinking in the world, and I see the young people, and you just sometimes sit and say, yeah, but this person did that. Sometimes things are important to repeat. Yeah. Because it
personally, maybe.
No, but also as activists. Because the structures are still there, or they came back in a different way, and we can repeat that. But, you know, sometimes they should also try to invent something new. Think about it as like step into a new world all the time. Try to go beyond what you know.
I think that ties it together.
Yeah, maybe.
Do you feel like it? Do you feel like we did it?
I don't know what I said. I have really no idea. I was in so many different places.
To me, it ties it all together because it's not, making art is not cut and dry. It's not like I go to work and pull a lever. It's so much more complicated, and it touches every level of who we are and who we aren't, and what the world is and what the world isn't. That there's no way we can put it down, you know. And maybe you can write an artist statement that talks about a project, but when you go broad, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
One thing at a time.
But I must say, you know, I use a philosophical way of dealing with my own doubt about why should I do art, and I had that when I made not this exhibition space, but the previous one. I was thinking a lot: do Copenhagen need one more exhibition space? Because I actually think there's quite a lot of art in Copenhagen, and I don't have time for it. So it's also a little bit of overflow. What do you call it?
A flood.
Yeah. In my opinion, it's good. Right.
Where is it excessive?
So but you know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But I always, you know, use this philosophical way of making the what do you call it? Negate the negative of it. Yeah. You know, what would the world be without art?
Right.
And that's fucking scary. So, you know, that's why I know art is important. But in this flood I live in Copenhagen, and in the people I'm around, and you know, we are, you know, we're not the 1%, but we are, you know, living. We have no money, but we are still, you know, living in this. We are the lucky ones, and we have to remember that. Yeah. So, we're co-producers of all this production in the world.
Fucking high five to that. Thank you, Signe. Much obliged.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Undergang Armchair. The intro and outro music was kindly provided by Johnny Ripper, and today's interstitial music was provided by Twin Music Home. You can find links to their music and tons of other conversations with great people on our summer festival of a website, culturalbandwidth.com. Keep an eye out for the new platform coming out very, very soon. If you do like this show, we would appreciate it if you just take a second to leave a review or a star on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It will help others find us. Thanks so much for joining us.